All right, friends, we have quite the guest in here today. I'm very excited to talk about all of the things with her. We have Gabrielle Pimstone. Hi.
Hi, Heather, and hi to the guests. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm always so grateful for people like yourself who give us a platform to share our message. So, thank you.
No, thank you. I love this kind of stuff because I'm a very like witchy energy. Like I got this in Cali, but it's my little crystals, my little
Is that
it's
a
so
horse? Oh, is that
cute. I
what is
have a matching one with my best friend.
that?
So we love all things energy, and your story really kind of hit me. So, I mean, let's just dive into it. What made you leave corporate and get into all of this?
Well, I think the question is what made me stay in corporate for 27 years because
That too.
I was burnt out for so long,
Yeah.
Heather. And, the lesson for me is that I wasn't tuned in. I felt like I was so accustomed to anxiety that I just assumed that this was my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually loved my career for about 20 years. I got a great deal of affirmation and fulfillment from it. And it was really intellectually stimulating, was all of that good stuff. But in around 2020, things started to change, and maybe slightly before then, where the career that once had so much resonance with me no longer was motivating, but moreover, I was feeling constantly anxious. Now, anxiety has always been a condition that I've lived with my whole life. But when I say it was dialed up, I think everyone,
Yeah.
so many of us can raise our hands.
Yeah.
I by 2020 I could barely muster the energy to, it was the pandemic time, to even get onto Zoom calls. Even that felt like too much. I wasn't sleeping. I was, constantly like annoying anxiety. I'd actually isolated from friends and family because I didn't have the energy to engage with other people. I had just enough energy to show up and do my work. That was it. And it was a Sunday morning that I woke up. It was early in the morning, and I
Mm-hmm.
had the most terrible pit in my stomach. It was, butterflies gone, dialed up. And so
Mm-hmm.
I tuned in. I thought, what is going on here? And when I tuned in, I located where it was, and then I realized what it was about. And it was about the fact that I had to go to work the next day. And I was
Ooh.
so miserable in my job that it was wrecking my life. Took myself off on a walk, listened to a podcast, and on the
I love that.
podcast, they're great, aren't they? And on the
They are.
podcast, the woman was talking about her struggle with anxiety and the fact that she'd always been her whole life waiting for the other shoe to fall, and that was me. And I realized at that moment I got to do something to simplify things for myself. And that was my moment of awakening and reckoning.
I love that. I love that. So, where did you go from there? Like, what got you into, have you always been about energy healing and all of that, or was this kind of a you felt pulled towards it and called to it?
A couple of things. I've always had a psychological bent. Like from a young age,
Hmm.
I was in the middle of the night with my journal, capturing my dreams at age 8. It was
Hmm.
highly unusual, right? But I also had the spiritual bent, which got stronger and stronger, especially after my father passed away. I got intrigued with the question, why dad? Where is dad? How do I connect with dad? And I was 9 at the time. And age 10, I asked my mum, I want to go see a medium. And she was like, no, you can't, which I
Right.
understood now.
No, no.
No. And so I went the psychology route, but this spiritual bent was always there. And so I was drawn to practitioners like Carl Jung, who, work in your dream world, and they've got a spiritual
Hmm.
bent. And so, and then over the course of my life, I started channeling. Things started, I started without my any effort on my behalf.
Right.
The world came to me, and then what happened in 2020? A few days after this experience, when I was listening to the podcast, an advert popped up, on my Instagram. And
Mm-hmm.
it was like one of those free weekend workshops, 3 days. I think it was like $10 or something. I signed up and I became intrigued. And the person that ran that workshop landed up being my teacher for 18 months. It wasn't energy per se that drew me in, it
Mm-hmm.
was a deep desire to change my life. I was really stuck off the back of having had a spiritual bent for so many years. And I was now at that point, I was channeling a lot and I didn't know what to do with it. I'd wake up in the morning hearing sound bites in this almost, it was English, but it wasn't my English. It was an old, it felt almost like Shakespearean English, and I had to
Oh,
decode it. And often I couldn't
yeah.
decode it. And then when I met this guy on this weekend, I was like, maybe this is the way to go. And then at that stage, I still knew nothing about sacred geometry, which is the tool that you use when you do energy work. And
Yeah.
I was still just want to change my life. And then I fell in love with sacred geometry as the course progressed, which is an 18-month course.
I love that. Um, circling like half a second back, you were saying sacred geometry because we had talked about in like our pre-episode chat, we had talked about energy protection via that geometry. What exactly is that? How do you like what are some ways to do it? How do you protect yourself that way?
Great.
Because obviously there's a lot of negative energy out there and I feel like especially after 2020 with, the pandemic and everything, I think people are kind of in a permanent just heavy energy. Like I haven't felt like a light energy in a really long time myself. So what is the energy protection via sacred geometry? Like what is all of that for people that don't know?
Great. I love that question. And I love it because I think you're absolutely right. Protecting your energy is such an important skill in mastering your energy. Because
Mm-hmm.
to your point, we have energetic cords. They're not visible, but we are tied energetically to people and places. And you don't have to
Yeah.
know the person, right? You can sit on a bus or an aeroplane or go to a shop and you can walk past somebody or sit next to somebody. And then inexplicably afterwards, you feel flat. So that's the power.
Here, right
you
here.
probably,
I
you probably
literally cannot I cannot go to historical sites and touch anything because like I will immediately
yes,
absorb the energy or like if
yes.
I'm around somebody and I'm constantly like incensing my house to like cleanse because I'm just like I can't, I'm very sensitive to it. So you're
Yeah.
saying all these things. I'm like, no, I get it. Check mark, check mark, check mark. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I got really excited for a second. Go ahead.
I know, but it sounds to me, we'll go back to what I was talking about, but it sounds to
Yeah.
me like you are a real empath and you might have the spiritual gift of transmutation. What you're probably doing. There's a difference between, being affected by somebody's energy, which many of us are, versus
Mm-hmm.
potentially what you are, which is you take on their energy. You can actually feel physically,
Yep.
if they're feeling sick, you feel it. If they're feeling
Mm-hmm.
anxious, you feel it. It's a
I
different
agree.
process entirely and it's difficult. So, for those listeners who might be empaths, then energy protection becomes even more
Mm-hmm.
important. So so I think it's an important topic. And sacred geometry, maybe we can talk a little bit about what it is. Do your listeners know what sacred geometry is, or do you need me to
I
go
know
back
a
to that?
little bit, but like obviously there's going to be a lot of people that are listening to this that don't know because I have a lot of like witchy listeners, but not
Yeah.
everybody does.
Okay.
It's so yeah. Let's just break it down for everybody.
Okay, I love that. So if you think about it, if you think about nature
Mm-hmm.
or even the human body, what you see, if you pay close attention, you will see these perfectly proportioned shapes and patterns throughout nature. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example of one. Like a snowflake would be a great example of one,
For sure.
right? Honeycomb, it's an octahedron, multiple octahedrons.
Yep.
Even, if you look into the middle of a petal of a flower, you see this perfect, it's almost, you'll see like a spiral shape. You
Yeah.
see it on animals. Have a look at a tortoise's shell and look at the geometric patterns on it. In the human body, our own DNA is, people call it spiral. It's probably two octahedrons back to back, but you can call it a
Right.
spiral. Our cells are spherical. So you've got these geometric patterns, and they are in absolute divine ratios and proportions. They're perfectly put together, and it's not
Hmm.
by coincidence. Galileo used to talk about sacred geometry being the language of the universe, the language that God used to design the universe. And so when you're alive to this, you realize they're everywhere, and they're there by design, not random.
Hmm.
Now, each one of them has got its own energetic frequency, like everything in life. So, with their specific frequencies, you can do different kinds of healing with them. So, some of them can be used for protection, which is what we're going to talk about now. Some
Yep.
can be used for to time travel. Some can be used to fix physical ailments, deal with physical. There's so many different applications, and the
Hmm.
more so that's so a simple geometric structure would be, for example, like a pyramid. But you get advanced sacred geometry, which houses multiple geometric shapes, and it's
Hmm.
complex in nature. So you just have to look at the Sri Yantra, for an example. It's got spheres, it's got different pyramids everywhere. It's quite a complex. It's a very complex structure. That's an
Hmm.
example of an advanced sacred geometry. But
Yep.
yeah, and the more advanced you get, the more potent it becomes. And what's really nice as a healer is when you use sacred geometry, it's got such divine proportions that actually, because when you're healing, you're channeling energy, channeling
Hmm.
divine energy. Now, if you weren't using sacred geometry, you'd be drawing on your own energy. But when you use sacred geometry as a healer, it acts as an adapter, and it actually channels the energy for you, and it can house infinitely more potent energy. So it
Right.
makes your healings more potent, but it also means you don't get as tired. So that's what
Right.
geometry is.
That makes complete and total sense.
Yeah.
I think a lot of, just from my experience with it, like especially with geometry, this may sound stupid, but I know like crystal grids all kind of work with um, certain geometric patterns or certain,
They do.
they all have to be in a certain like spot.
They do.
So that is that like kind of similar
Yes, it
in a
is kind of
way, or
similar.
like a
It is.
variation.
Well, it's yes, it's very similar. Actually, crystals themselves are made up of geometric patterns. If you
Yeah.
put a piece of crystal under a microscope, you would
Mm-hmm.
see the different shapes and patterns. And if you want, for example, to know or to find out what a nice sacred geometry for unconditional love is, for example, you could study the geometry of rose quartz. That's there's an argument for that. And then because that's
Yeah.
the crystal of love,
Yeah.
so
No,
you could do
totally makes
that.
sense.
You could. The other way is you can download your own sacred geometry, which I've done. I mean, I've been
Mm-hmm.
taught sacred geometries universally, but then when you get into it, you start to download your own geometries and you know what to use them for and when to use them.
Right.
So it's quite it's really interesting. But
There's so much to it. I love it.
there's so
So,
much to it, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So, because there's so much to it, obviously, this isn't going to be like a one size fits all follow up question. But when it comes to protecting your energy via this way, like, what are some very simple, like, somebody could do it right now to just feel like their energy is more protected?
Great. So okay, let me give you the simplest. I like
I know
pyramids.
it's such a complicated answer.
And I was thinking of what I use, but I mean, I could share. I could let me share. Let me share three simple geometries and try them on for
Perfect.
size and
Mm-hmm.
see which one feels best for you. Because I think that's there isn't one size fits all, right? So
Absolutely.
a very basic geometry is a sphere. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
what you do with all of these geometries that I'm going to talk to you about is you build them around you. Now, how do you build an invisible structure? Because you're building the energetic frequency. So let's think of a sphere. You can either close your eyes and just imagine that you're sitting in a big sphere,
Mm-hmm.
or, and this is typically what happens in the beginning, we like to use our hands because it gives us a kind of a greater sense of efficacy. So
Right.
you can actually build a sphere around you in your mind, with your hands or
Okay.
in your mind's eye. And then when you're sitting in the sphere, you just kind of tune in, you imagine that the sphere is acting as a barrier where low vibrational energy cannot enter, it can't permeate.
Mm-hmm.
Only energy of love and light can, and you can actually set an intention. You can set the intention once the structure is built, or as you're building it. I set the intention that this sphere protect my energy from low vibrational energy. It's not allowed near me. Only energy of love and light can come in. So that's the simplest thing you can do. You build a
Mm-hmm.
structure and you set an intention and you feel into the experience or the sense of being protected.
Well,
Those three
yeah.
things. You
The
can do this, yeah, and you can do the same with a pyramid. Okay,
Perfect.
so there's another way you can build a pyramid. You can think about, here's a little pebble, you know,
Mm-hmm.
think of there's got a pebble here. You have got a pebble in front of your feet, a pebble behind your feet, a pebble to the right of you, and a pebble to the left of you. And what you can do is you actually draw a line between the pebble at the top and the pebble to the right, the pebble to the left, from the top to the pebble in the front, top to the pebble in the bottom, and then you can actually join the lines, at the bottom. Otherwise, you can just build it, or you can do it
Right.
in your mind's eye. I don't actually use those ones very often. I use a vortex. And the reason that I love a vortex structure, it's like a spiral structure, is
Mm-hmm.
because the other two are closed and I feel like I played around with, I felt a bit claustrophobic in them.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. With a vortex, think of a tornado structure that is all around you. It's got like a
Right.
top and it's got an open bottom. And I like it because it's in motion. And so actually they're all are in motion, but it feels like it's in motion. And you set the intention that energy of love and light can come in through the top, and any low vibrational energy that's already in your field gets released through the bottom into the earth for purification. So that's
Yeah.
a third structure that you can use to protect your energy.
Yeah. And I think to touch on what you were saying earlier, because you kept saying intentions, from personal experience, intentions are so important. So
They are
important.
everything. They're actually everything. Heather.
They really are.
They really are when it comes to energy work. Because
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing with an intention is you are pulling your creative energy in a particular direction. That's how intentions work.
Mm-hmm.
So the minute you say something or concentrate or focus on something, what you're doing is you're directing your energy to that thing and creating it.
Exactly. Exactly. Like intention is everything. If you and same with manifesting. If you and people don't realize that sometimes you accidentally manifest the shitty things that happen to you because you repeat it over and over and over again, and voila, that's manifesting. You have accidentally manifested yourself into a shitstorm. So like, because I've done it. I've literally been like, I accidentally manifested this like thing that happened that I just it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So also with like the manifesting and the intentions, you have to the love and light. And I know that sounds so cliche and so like okay, but it's everything. It's
It really is.
everything.
Heather, what you're talking about is the idea of counter manifesting. We're
Yep.
manifesting or counter manifesting all the time. By counter manifesting,
Done that
you
so many
actually
times. It's
think,
so
what?
bad.
Yeah, you're right. And I don't think it's cliched. I think when you get it and
Mhm.
you really get this concept, it is immensely powerful. There's
Mhm.
everything happens from a manifestation perspective, everything happens with intention and by the speed of intention as well.
Yes. All of this. I love this so much.
Me
I
too.
could talk about this for
Me
hours because
too.
this
How
is
much time have
totally
you
my
got?
wheelhouse. Totally my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But to kind of move like a little bit to the right, you were talking about burnout. And I
Mm,
know the burnout epidemic and all of that is something that you're also passionate about tweaking,
yeah.
for lack of a better term, because honestly, in this day and age, burnout is kind of unfortunately inevitable.
Yeah.
So, in doing that, what are some, because I don't think people realize when they're in active burnout. So, what are some signs of active burnout? And what can we start to do to try and combat it as much as we possibly can, especially in this day and age? There's going to be no way that somebody's just going to skirt around burnout and not worry about it per se. But
Yeah,
how can we
yeah.
recognize it, especially early on? And then how can we try to, again, protect our energy as much as possible?
That sounds so great. Thank you for that question. It's wonderful.
Of course.
I'm obsessed with burnout because I was in burnout when on that
Mm-hmm.
walk, when I put those headphones on and I listened to that podcast. So, and you're right, you don't want to get into burnout. You want to preemptively manage.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk about how to manage burnout once you're there, but also how to do it, how to not get there,
Yeah.
So let's just start with understanding what burnout actually is, because it's
Yes.
sometimes it feels like it's physical, right? You feel
Mm-hmm.
exhausted, but it's actually a psychological construct. And the way that I define it is what happens when the demands of the situation exceed your capacity to deal with them, right?
Okay.
So that's what it is. So think of yourself as like a cup or a mug, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You can have a medium sized mug, a large mug, or a really small espresso cup. If you're operating from a small espresso cup, you're going to feel burnt out quicker because you haven't got as much capacity. But if you go into Starbucks and you buy one of those huge mugs there, you're going to be able to handle more. In other words, you're
Right.
going to be more resilient. So that's burnout is. It's the what happens to you when you feel like the demands of the situation are larger or greater than your capacity to deal with them. And that's a very overwhelming feeling. It's overwhelm.
Right.
So the signs are really easy to pick up. Physical exhaustion is one of them. So when you're, burnt out and got physical symptoms, you're feeling tired and drained most of the time. You may, like me, be experiencing frequent headaches. You may experience muscle tension, for example, or any other physical symptoms. That we've all got different physical symptoms, but that tell you that your body's giving you those signals. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really important that we listen to those. But that is physical burnout. Then there's emotional exhaustion where you're feeling overwhelmed all the time. Like the smallest thing is going to be, it's going to trigger you. Like you're unable to cope with even the smallest stressor. And you may start to feel, and this is where I was, increasingly detached from your work or your personal life or both. Then those would be, so you've got to differentiate between physical and emotional symptoms. Sometimes a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people who are in burnout suffer from insomnia or sleep disorders.
I'm feeling
Now
so called out right now.
say what do you think?
I'm over here like, yep, yep, mm-hmm,
Tick
mm-hmm.
tick tick. I
And then you're like
know.
insomnia, and I'm like, well, shit. I've known I've been in burnout for like a little bit for a multitude of reasons, but I'm over here
Yeah.
like, oh, well, this is the confirmation you needed.
Well, you know
So,
what? And the reason, like when we have burnout, this feeling of overwhelm, it's an energy. There's energy
mm-hmm,
in us. And then what we have to do is we've got to go and have a look at the root. Where is that energy stuck or lodged in your body and release it? It doesn't really release on its own. I can give you techniques now, but I can't give you advanced techniques, but there are things you can do
right.
to relieve the symptoms, and we can talk about that.
Oh, for sure.
So, sometimes like when you're burnt out, you feel more irritable. You've got more
Mm-hmm.
reactivity than normal. So that's easy to spot.
Yeah.
Now, there are different ways that you can deal with burnout in energy work, because if you think about, the demands of the situation are higher than your capacity to deal with them, you can either
Right.
reduce the demands being placed on you, which is not often possible, or
Nope.
you can increase your capacity to deal with them, and that's the goal. So,
Yeah.
what you're trying to do with energy work is you're trying to increase your energetic capacity to deal with adversity, to deal with overwhelm, to deal with stresses, all of that stuff. Right.
Right.
So, what this means, and you'll know this from the work, manifestation work, is it becomes really
Mm-hmm.
important to keep your vibration high because your vibration is your protection. A lot of people walk around wearing crystals. Like I used to carry crystals in my bag when I went to work, and but the more you work on your energetic capacity, you don't need those because your energy becomes your protection, which is really a beautiful thing.
We love that.
Isn't it great? Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
so yeah. So what I do now, I can share what I do, and I can therefore share what I teach other people to do. Is in and amongst burnout, even when you're feeling burnt out or feeling at rock bottom, there'll always be moments where you feel a bit lighter. Yeah. And
Oh,
so
definitely.
always. And
Yeah.
so it might be when you're driving your car and listening to a song that you love, or it might
Right.
be when you go out into the sun and just get, hit by fire energy. It could be anything like that. But
Mm-hmm.
what you've got to do is you've got to seize moments when your energy is a bit higher and you've got to hold them down. You've got to really hold them down. So catching yourself when you're feeling light, what you've got to do is you've got to stop what you're doing and you've got to sit in that frequency. You've got to consciously bring it in. Now you can imagine that energy, that light energy coming through the crown of your head, filling you up from head to toe. Feel it at a cellular level in your body. I'm very, very big on working, energetic state and energetic embodiment. So that's what I do. Even when I'm feeling like low, I find the moment where I'm feeling a bit better and I milk that moment and I
Yeah.
bring that energy into me. Make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. There was a couple of days when I was actually out of town that about a month ago that I came back and I was like I was recharged. And then of course I didn't hang on to the energy I felt from that because I didn't know to hold on to it, but I was like, yes, I'm recharged, I'm ready to go. And I think within like 4 days I was back to my usual like bleh. And I'm
Lovely
sitting
job.
here like I should have known that. Like if I had known that like a month ago, I probably, but also like I'm in the middle of closing on a house. So once that stressor is gone, I think it'll be a little, it's
Yes,
been a crazy day. Like
yes.
I've literally been in between episodes calling my lender, shooting this email out, like sending, I don't know, my birth certificate at this point out to the underwriters. So yeah, it's been crazy, but you don't realize how much you're juggling until you sit down and you're like, oh, I'm dealing with a lot.
And
And I
then
think
what
sometimes sitting with that is overwhelming as well because you're like, how did I get here?
Yeah. Well, you got there because you weren't managing your energy. And we all
Yeah.
get there because we're not managing our energy. So it requires of us to tune in. Here's a really simple question that your
Hmm.
listeners can do to boost their energy. Sit quietly for a moment in whatever way feels right for you and just tune in and ask, am I feeling heavy or light? Yeah. And if you're
Yeah.
feeling heavy, then that's what you've got to work with. What are the things that you can do that are going to elevate your energetic frequency? And this is where self care comes in.
Yes.
And so when you're already feeling overwhelmed, what you can do is you can practice, you can amplify acts of self care. And it sounds simple, but we just don't do it. What are the things that make you feel full, that make you feel light, that make you feel in flow? For me, I got to do some baking. I've got to bake a cake or make a dessert in
I
that
love that.
kitchen, and I'm in flow. For other people, it's learning something new. Actually, that's also it gives you a sense of feeling back in control. Listening to a podcast can be very elevating. Going outside, spending time in nature, taking a salt bath, whatever it is for you. And I
Hmm.
think that we've all got those things available to us, and we've got to really access them and use them more.
Well, because I think also like people think self care is, a face mask, a green juice smoothie, like all of the health and wellness. And it can be as simple as baking, reading a book, just going outside, literally touching grass. Everybody will say touch grass is like an insult. And I'm like, no, actually, it's very helpful advice. You should probably do it. You know, like
I agree.
grounding yourself, that kind of thing.
Well, that's right. And the different elements speak to different, people. For me, my favorite elemental is fire energy. So if I'm feeling really flat, like I've had a series of back-to-back meetings, I'm a little bit, off my game. Between calls, I'll go and stand in my garden and I'll just catch 3 minutes of sun rays. And, that when I get back to my desk, I'm feeling lighter. I'm feeling, more energized. For others, it is earth energy. So standing barefoot on the ground and imagining that the cords at the bottom of your feet are wrapped around the core of the earth, and that the earth energy is running up those cords and filling your body with this nourishing,
Yeah,
grounding energy. For others, it's water energy, right? So being in water, going for a swim, having a shower, having a bath. We got to find out which elemental speaks to us most, and we've got to milk that as well. So find the things that make you feel at ease and do them more often when you are feeling burnt out, stressed, overwhelmed, all those things.
exactly. I know for myself, like I'm a Capricorn, so I'm an earth sign, but then I'm a Scorpio rising, so water sign. So for me, like being in the mountains and like I'm not really a nature person, but I like the thought of being in a cabin in the middle of the woods or in the mountains where I just don't have to talk to people is like so like being in the mountains or being on like the west coast of the US and seeing the ocean and like all the marine animals and stuff like that those are my things. So when you were saying like the fire energy and I was like, oh wait, is it because I'm an earth sign? And like maybe it is, maybe
Yeah.
it isn't, but it's very not coincidental how they all kind of tie
Come
in.
together. Yeah, yeah. And then you said something so important. I just want to go back to it when you were
Yeah.
talking, and you said for you, being in a cabin in the mountains in solitude is just heaven for you. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
being in solitude is a form of self care as well,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes.
It really allows us to regroup. It allows
Mm-hmm.
us to clear those energetic cords. It's just you and your environment. And I do that a lot. When I need to look after myself, it's me time.
Yeah. My me time is like in the summer with like the windows down and it's dark and going for a drive with going nowhere, just me, myself, and the radio on a volume that's ungodly loud. But
Yeah,
I see, I thrive on my alone time though, but I'm also like an extroverted introvert kind of thing.
me too.
So there are some people that fill my fill my battery and fill my cup, and then there's other people that I'm just like like you're
Yeah,
great, but I need a second. So,
yeah,
and especially being in this industry where I'm talking to people 24/7, there, I get off a day of episodes and I'm just like, nobody talk to me. Nobody. Like,
yeah.
I have given my customer service voice, my this, my that. I have given everything to the podcast and I need a book, I need some trash TV, and I need nobody to speak to me for the next 4 hours.
You're absolutely right. And in and amongst what you're saying, it's more than just solitude. Another way of managing your energetic boundaries is to be very discerning about who you spend time with,
Yes.
which is often why when we are elevating and we're expanding in our journey, that friendships fall off because the
Yeah.
kinds of relationships dynamics that used to fuel you now repel you. I had that experience.
Yeah.
And so one has to just be mindful that when your energy shifts or when you're wanting your energy to shift, you have to really rejig who you spend time with as well.
Yeah. I spent a good chunk of my 20s going through friendships. And now that I'm 32. So I'm not really in my 30s. I'm enough in my 30s that I can say in my 30s, but that, the second I hit 30, I was like, no, these are the kind of friendships that I want. Like, I guess the boring friendships, like we don't go out all the time. We don't, we can sit on my couch and both be on our phones or just not even talking and just be. And those are the friendships that I literally am straight recharging from because I'm around somebody that also understands that I need a second. And it's so fulfilling to have those people that, I can talk to and then I can just be silent with. And I'm not worried about if they feel like I'm ignoring them or they don't feel like I'm ignoring them. And it's just when you find your like group or your like individual friendships, especially and mostly in your 30s where they match your energy, um and they accept you for you, and it's like it's like a lateral energy exchange. It's just
Yes.
I
Yes.
cannot even stress how valuable that is.
It's more than valuable. It's entirely necessary, for
Yeah.
mental health and it's really, and mental well-being. As you were talking and describing your ideal person, your ideal friend, I was
Hmm.
thinking about the power of animals and what it means for me to spend, and I know you've got a pet, to spend
Oh, I
time
have several. I
with
have four
several.
cats and a dog.
Ah,
I
you
have
still
a
have two
zoo.
cats. I had to put both my beautiful geriatric cats down 18 months ago, and I haven't had the nerve to get anything else.
Oh,
But what the thing with animals, if we can just go there for a moment, because they really are incredible ways, vehicles to manage your energy space, to protect your energy. Because what
yes.
they do is they are natural transmuters. We were speaking about that earlier. They've got this gift of taking on our energy, almost putting it through the washing and then giving it back to us in a different form. And that's why our pets can sense when we're feeling low. And when we hug them and we spend time with them, we land up feeling better. So it's another very practical way and a
Yeah.
beautiful way of protecting your energy.
Well, yeah, I mean, we had talked about it like right before we hopped on the recording, but I have an Australian Shepherd, and anybody that knows anything about Aussies is they are incredibly energy sensitive dogs. Like it's a running joke that when you get an Aussie as like an emotional support animal, but then you wind up being the emotional support animal for the dog because they're so highly sensitive to anxiety. So she's been like super reactive and like um and when I say reactive, she'll just sit in the middle of the living room and just like bark like at you at something. She's very like you can tell her energy's super off. And I was like, what has gotten into you lately? And then I realized the last couple of weeks, the energy in the house has been insanely heavy. So not only am I taking that on, she's taking that on. And like, I care more about her well-being than I do mine. So I'm over here like we gotta like smoke cleanse the entire house. We gotta reset everything. Like salting. Like it's just, I'm like, we gotta do a reset. But then like my cats, my soul cat that passed away October 2022, like she was the one that when my energy was off or like I was having an awful day, she would come like right here and
Yes,
land
yes.
and would absorb it all. And like I don't think it like bugged her all that much, but she was like my soulmate in a cat. And now this cat that we just got a month ago is doing very similar stuff. And I'm just like, Stella, is that you?
Mm,
Like, did you send me this little guy? Because thank you. But,
yes,
and
yes,
it's just like, the purring, he like lays across my like throat. And I'm just like, as much as people are like, oh God, I'm like, no, that means my throat chakra is probably like beyond off right now.
exactly,
Like,
exactly.
first it was my heart chakra, and like she went through my 20s with me where, my dating history should be studied. So, she was on like the heart chakra and like the solar plexus, I think. This one, I don't know. But and then this little one's like right here, where I'm learning to uphold boundaries and create boundaries and speak up for myself and communicate. And I'm just like, that's not a coincidence. Like it's
No,
just
it's
not.
not. They're little spiritual beings, cats
They are.
particularly. And
They're
my
amazing.
soul, I mean, I love both my cats equally, but my soul cat was Venus.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got photos of when I had bad flu, for example. and she would just sit right next to me, staring at me, and she would watch me before she went to sleep. She would
Hmm.
watch me as I fell asleep to me. So they've got this gift, and it's a blessing and a curse, I guess.
Yes.
You would know as a
Yeah.
deep empath, as an intuitive empath, that
Hmm.
it's a blessing and a curse. It's quite a big burden to carry. And so, what I teach people when I'm working with empaths is how to protect their energy. That becomes the number one skill.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's a blessing and a curse to, especially have a soulmate and a pet because it wrecks you. I have not been the same since. I really have not.
Yes.
So, being like, I guess, blessed by the universe enough that I have another one is just like good
I know.
because I clearly need it at this point. I clearly
Yes.
do.
Yes. And I'm
So,
starting to
but
think about
yeah.
it myself now. I mean, I've just been resisting it because my cats were really old. I'm not sure
Yeah.
exactly how old they were because they were rescues, but I had
Hmm.
them for 20 years and they were about 10 months when we got them. So they were
Yeah.
about 21 years old. And for 2 decades, it's a bit of a ball and chain, going
Yeah.
away is a hassle. So I'm kind of enjoying the freedom now.
Hmm.
And I also just feel there's a part of me, I don't know that I'm ready to love in that way again quite
It's
yet.
hard.
It's
It's
hard.
hard. This cat kind of fell into my lap in a way. Otherwise, I never, like, the stars had to basically align for me to get this little guy because I was not. I was not looking to replace her. Like, granted, I had three other cats, but I was not looking to replace her. And I was
Right.
good with the three cats. I was good with the three cats and the dog. Like, the ratio was good. Everybody was getting along. I didn't want to. I had always said if I do ever get a fourth cat, it would have to the stars would have to be on the line, and they did. They really did.
Yeah.
So it worked out. But like now I have my little void, my little all black man. So
Oh, that's wonderful. And he's a lovely Aussie like me.
he's beautiful. I love him so much.
Awesome. Great. I
But
mean, I could talk about pets for the rest of our
I know
conversation.
I literally I could talk about cats and like Australian Shepherds. They're like my favorite breed. They are literally high maintenance as hell, and I don't recommend them for 95% of the population, including me. Like it was a learning curve. It was a learning curve. I was not prepared for that. It's a lot of work, but
Well, they're
absolutely worth
highly
it.
intelligent.
If you're willing to put the work and the time in, the
Yeah.
Australian Shepherds are literally the best freaking dog. I want like six more. I'm not gonna get
Oh,
six more, but hypothetically, I always see like photos of like a truck full of them, and I'm like, I want it. Do I? No, because I like my sanity like where it's at, which is like barely functioning. But it's at least barely functioning. It would be gone if I got
still
another one.
functioning. Wonderful.
But I, God, I could talk to you for hours about all of
Me
this. But this
too.
has been so freaking amazing, and I hope that people take things from this and learn how to protect their energy, especially in this day and age where it is vital. And just they do what they got to do. But thank you so much for taking the time out. I know it's like what 9 in the morning where you're
Yeah,
at.
it's actually a decent hour because I often do my podcast at like 6 in the morning to accommodate
Oh
the
my
American
gosh.
time zone. So this is
Well,
luxury.
thank you for waking up and taking the time out because I know these time differences can be a little crazy.
It's my
But
pleasure.
yeah, thank you for coming on. We will have everything to find you linked in the episode below or the episode description below. I will have her tagged on Instagram when the episode comes out because you guys all should be following her. She's amazing. I'm so grateful to have met you for sure.
I'm so grateful to have met you and thank you for setting such a wonderful tone to the conversation as a host. I really
Thank you.
deeply appreciate that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.